Welcome back. So this is the first video for Chapter 7 in Intermediate Macroeconomics. Now, Chapters 3 through 6 were all about the short-run fluctuations in the macroeconomy, so the recessions and expansions that the economy experiences in the short run. And the main assumption in our ISLM model was that we didn't worry about inflation. We didn't worry about adjustments to the price level in a macroeconomic setting, right? We assumed that sort of in the short run prices were sticky, they didn't adjust. In the medium run, obviously, the major assumption that we're going to change is that prices do adjust, right? And the whole sort of short run, medium run, long run picture is not, we never get to, we're always in the short run, right? We never get to the medium run and the long run, so prices are going to adjust as they adjust. Sometimes inflation happens slowly, sometimes it happens more quickly, but this is really sort of the next thing we're going to put into our model. So now as we let prices adjust, one of the things that we want to think about is the relationship between the labor market and unemployment and inflation. And so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start here in Chapter 7 in the labor market, which is probably the most important market from a macroeconomic point of view. One, because obviously we care about the unemployment rate. We want to understand why we have involuntary unemployment. Why are there people who want to work and can't find a job? Also, wages are the most important cost for firms. And so when wages are changing, that's going to change how firms price their goods and services. So we're going to focus here in Chapter 7 on that labor market. So these are some numbers from the book. We'll look at some updated graphs in a little bit. This was from 2014. 2014, we were almost recovered from the financial crisis that began in 2008 and 2009. I would say we needed another year or two to fully recover. So you can see the way we think about it is we start with the total population, right, which was about 320 million. And then we think about the non-institutionalized civilian population. So that's everybody over 16 who is not in jail or prison or the military. We count the military separately. So that was 248 million. So you can think of that number as the number of people who could be working, right? And then we divide that into the people who want to work and the people who don't want to work. And so the civilian labor force is the people who want to work. That was about 156 million. And then out of the labor force was 92 million. And there's lots of reasons you could be out of the labor force. You could be retired, you could be home taking care of kids, you could be in school. So there's plenty of reasons to be out of the labor force, although some of course are better than others. Some people will be out of the labor force even though they want to work because they've given up looking for work. They're discouraged, and we'll talk about that. And then we break up the civilian labor force into employed and unemployed. So you can see in 2014, the unemployed were 9.5 million, and then the unemployment rate is just the unemployed divided by the civilian labor force, 9.5 divided by 155.9, which is 6.1%. So that was going to come down, right? That came down over the next 5 years until obviously the pandemic hit in 2020, and the unemployment rate went back up. So one of the things that's important to remember or learn is that even though the unemployment rate usually changes just a little bit each month, right? It might go up 1 or 2 percentage points or down 1 or 2 percentage points. There's actually a whole lot going on in the labor market every month. There's a lot of flows into and out of the labor market. So there's going to be a lot of people separating, either because they quit or they were laid off or they were fired. And there's going to be a lot of hires. And so it's just the difference in those two numbers that actually give us the total number of, how many people are working, how many people are looking for work. So we rely on the current population survey, which gives us, these monthly flows. And we're also interested in the average duration of unemployment. So one of the things that was very true in the last recession from the financial crisis was that we had a lot of people who were unemployed for a long time. And that can be even, more painful. Obviously, your unemployment benefits will usually run out. So unemployment benefits typically last about 6 months. They were extended up to almost 2 years in some areas in the financial crisis. but we are talking about people who were unemployed for 2, 3, 4 years, and that makes it much harder to find a job, right? Your connections to the labor market are weaker. You know fewer people, and there's also discrimination against the long-term unemployed by employers. So they're worried about hiring someone who's been out of work for so long. So here we can see a typical month. This is an average from 1996 to 2014. And so you can see we've got 3 buckets, right? We've got employment, unemployment, and out of the labor force. And employment in these years averaged 139 million. Unemployment averaged 8.8 million, and out of the labor force averaged 77 million. But these arrows show the average monthly flow from one bucket to the other. So, there's 3 million people who just go from one job to another job every month, right? You quit one job, you take another job. There's 1.8 million on average that went from employment to unemployment, and 2 million that went from unemployment to employment. So you might think, all right, well, that's really what we have to worry about. But in fact, there's a lot of people going into and out of the labor force also. So there are 3.7 million who were not counted as unemployed the previous month. They were counted as out of the labor force who went right into employment. There are 3.4 million that go from employment to out of the labor force, meaning I was working last month, this month I'm not working, but I'm not looking for a job. And then there are some people who go from out of the labor force to unemployment. Last month I was not looking for a job, this month I am looking for a job. And then vice versa, unemployment to out of the labor force. Last month I was looking for a job, but I didn't have one. This month I still don't have a job, but I'm not looking. That 1.9 million, that could include a lot of discouraged workers, so we want to try to capture them as well. This is a nice graph from Calculated Risk blog, which is a great blog if you're interested in the labor market, in sort of the ups and downs of the economy, the real estate market. He does a really good job of presenting data. So here, the blue bars and red bars the blue bars are quits, so how many people quit that month. The red bars are how many people were laid off or discharged, fired. And so the total is how many separations there were that month. The blue line is how many hires there were. So if the blue line is higher than the red bar, then we're adding jobs. And then the yellow line is the number of job openings. So you can see in the financial crisis over here in the middle of this graph, first we lost a lot of jobs, right? And there were many fewer job openings. But I think the interesting thing is that even in the depths of the recession, right? Even in like June 2009, which was the bottom of the recession, we were still hiring over 3 million people every month. So the labor market is always going, even if it doesn't feel like it. And certainly if you were looking for work in June 2009, it didn't necessarily feel like people were hiring. Job openings increased dramatically, and then we saw this craziness with the pandemic, right? There were 11.8 million layoffs and discharges in March and 8 million in April. So that was obviously just basically off the chart here. But then you can see we did recover, and so we have been adding jobs. This was through November. December, we lost a few jobs. January, we added a few jobs. This is 2021. And so we're going to have to see how quickly we can get back to where we were. We're still about 10 million jobs down from February 2020. So hopefully once everybody's vaccinated, people start buying again, and that means firms will start hiring again. So as I mentioned before, we want to think about discouraged workers, right? Discouraged workers are not captured in the unemployment number because they're not looking for work, but they would like to work, right? It's just that they've given up looking for work. And so we have been measuring this since the early 1990s. And sometimes what we want to focus on instead of the unemployment rate is the employment rate. So the employment rate is the number of employed divided by the non-institutionalized population. And so we don't expect that number to be 100, but if we see that number falling, especially for people who are between 25 and 54 years old, then that could be another signal that there's weakness in the labor market.